Ken, these demonstrators are now here for a second day in a row in front of the ICE building here in San Francisco, and they're here just to be in support of the immigrants that are held in detention centers just upstairs and across the country, but also to denounce the practices of ICE like the separation of families. It's part of a nationwide movement, as we've seen Occupy ICE groups in Portland, for instance, as well, and they demand that the government shut down the agency altogether. It is a miracle on City View Way here tonight, as this Honda that was driving downhill ended up crashing beside the home that is still sitting next to and what was a parked van that has now since been moved. Firefighters got the call just after 8:30 tonight and rushed over here. They are just around the corner, so they responded just in time, considering that the driver and their passenger were pinned inside that vehicle and still waiting for help when they arrived. So the fire department is now packing up and leaving. Their job here is done, and they say that they're turning over the rest of the work over to the building and their management team in order to let people back in.
That's exactly right. People have gathered here in the heart of the Castro, in front of the theater where Heklina has performed many a time, to honor her life and legacy as a premier drag performer, not just here in San Francisco, but around the world. People dressed to the nines in her honor came in style and fashion, smiling, singing, dancing, crying at times, and this was truly a celebration of life, as you mentioned. There was one moment where they tried to do a sort of moment of silence for Heklina, but they said, you know what, that's not her style. Let's hear that boisterous laugh of hers one more time as everybody cackled together in her honor. Let's listen to that. Let me tell you, this is one of the best places to be for the fireworks show, and you can see why. I mean, we've got the Bay Bridge, the glimmering lights, and the iconic ferry building clock tower, which is helping us to count down to the stroke of midnight, which is when the fireworks display will happen right here.
It was around this time 53 years ago that American Indians of different tribes took control of Alcatraz Island and proclaimed it as their own. I traveled to the island with one of the leaders of that movement as she reflects on their protest. More than 1.4 million people visit an island in the center of the San Francisco Bay each year. Alcatraz is best known for the country's most feared federal penitentiary, where the worst of the worst were locked up. But in 1963, the prison was shut down and served no purpose for years. Then in 1969, a group set forth to claim the 22 acres and draw attention to the genocide committed against all Native Americans by establishing a cultural center at the site. Their live-in protest gained national attention. Today, Dr. Leneda Warjack, who led the occupation alongside Richard Oakes, is heading back to the island to instead lead a tour. As the boat approaches Alcatraz, traces of their decades-old demonstration come into view. Red paint at the front entrance reads, Indian Land.
It was exciting. We wanted to do something to help our people in fighting for treaty rights and enforcement of our treaties. Is the only thing that we could do that was positive in the right direction.
Warjack explained the occupiers were guided by the understanding that federal surplus property reverts back to Native Americans if they claim it. So for the next year and a half, about 400 natives from far and wide used the abandoned prison as a home. They went by the name Indians of all tribes. Everyone cooked, cleaned, and took care of their kids. Meanwhile, Warjack, Oakes, and their spokesperson, John Trudell, addressed the media and tried to establish talks with the U.S. government. She says a negotiator refused to do so, saying that they were too young and militant, which the group denied, given their peaceful approach. But not all American Indians backed the occupation. A letter expressing opposition was written to the president by members of the local Ohlone tribe, who never received a federally recognized reservation. It read in part, "Those who are squatting on this rock are mainly from other states. If the United States is ready to deed this land to anyone, we claim that right. We will immediately restore it as a natural wildlife sanctuary and a way station for all people navigating the bay."
We can't help but be who we are, and this was the place that we wanted to occupy, and it had international press. So the media is really important for us. We either live or die by the press. And we didn't have any, we never had any acknowledgement for anything that we ever fought for, and people were dying.
Although the occupiers were eventually forced out by federal agents in 1971, Warjack credits the protest for other forms of progress for Indigenous people. And today, tourists who flock to the Rock can learn more about Native strife in a temporary exhibit titled Red Power. It pales in comparison to the grand vision Warjack and her supporters had. So 53 years later, Warjack continues that mission. She wrote to Deb Haaland, the first Native U.S. Interior Secretary, requesting a permanent American Indian Museum, education, and cultural center on the island.
There might be some people who didn't even realize that happened. You know, she mentioned the other forms of progress that that action took. Can you elaborate on what she was talking about?
So she credited their demonstration for leading to other forms of progress, as I mentioned, one of which she pointed to was President Nixon eliminated a policy called Public Law 280, which at the time extended federal law enforcement into Indian territory. And then she also said that the Indian Child Welfare Act was a result of this as well. So that stopped the federal government from taking custody of Indigenous kids.
Interesting. That's a big evolution still going on with relations between tribes and the federal government.
That one's actually hanging in the balance with the Supreme Court soon as well. Well, thankfully, they are just shaken up, but they are doing just fine now. They were treated and released for minor smoke inhalation, but fire crews out here credit the quick thinking of one of the two boys, a 12-year-old who grabbed that baby and got out and then warned his neighbors about the fire as his complex was submerged in flames. Dramatic video shows the moments the first firefighters arrived to an Antioch apartment complex engulfed in flames and black smoke Tuesday afternoon. A mother and 5 children were inside a unit closest to the fire. Crews credit the quick thinking of 12-year-old Anthony Phillips, who grabbed his baby nephew as soon as he saw the first sign of danger.
Some people be telling me family's first and all that, family first. So I'm glad he okay and stuff. 'Cause I don't know what I would do if he was still in that fire.
As the fire raged on, Anthony ran downstairs and knocked on neighbors' doors with a warning.
I heard banging on my door, and all I heard was banging and help me. So I didn't know what was going on, so I dialed 911.
He and his nephew were treated for minor smoke inhalation and released. A Red Cross volunteer told KRON 4 News they're now among at least 20 people who are displaced with no place to go. Fire investigator Vic Masinkoff with the Contra Costa Fire Protection District is looking into the cause of this destructive fire, but says it's not suspicious.
The area that they determined as the general area of origin had quite a bit of electrical distribution equipment, wiring, circuit boxes, and other equipment that possibly is related to the cause, but it's too early to tell and continues to be under investigation.
The Red Cross volunteers said that they were working on getting a nearby elementary school prepared for possibly housing these displaced families until they find a permanent place to stay. Live in Antioch, Sogomonian, KRON 4 News.